Right here to Mega Trends, we only talk about what your social media says is trending. So let's get right back to it. The Pentagon trending today, $125 billion in waste was uncovered at the Defense Department, but senior officials hid the report. There are 1 million office jobs in the Department of Defense and only 1.3 million active duty troops. Wonder why this is only coming out now that President Obama is on his way out of office. Back with me now from his super secret underground bunker, Barry Nussbaum. Barry, this Pentagon report, crazy. There are about as many people being paid to sit behind a desk as there are troops on active duty. And Republicans, usually for increased military and defense spending, but not waste.
Yeah, you know, it's ironic, Gina, that it took somebody from outside government to walk in and say, hey, you guys, we're going to cut the crap out of the budget, but we're not going to cut goods and services. And to the people inside the Beltway, that seems like an oxymoron. How do you cut the budget, but services stay the same? Because to the bureaucracy, which is an animal that never shrinks, it just grows. Every year, they are defending themselves. And what really needs to be done, as Trump talked about a lot on the campaign, it didn't get much press, was I know there's waste. I know there's fat. And when I get there, we're going to roll up our sleeves and start cutting the budget. Like what we talked about before break, Dr. G. How do you build 2 Air Force Ones for $4 billion?
Yeah.
Right? Well, what happens is when people get cushy contracts that aren't being really reviewed and bid properly, the bureaucracy is out of control. It's a forest fire. And these kinds of reports, like the one that came out today, are so illustrative of the fact that if it's a Republican president or a Democratic president, nobody seems to touch the bureaucracy. They consider it a budget cut in Washington if the growth in a certain budget of a specific department, if the growth slows down, not the budget being cut, They just slow the growth.
Well, if Trump gets his pick through Senate confirmation, Mad Dog Mattis is going to be the guy in charge of the Pentagon. He is, pretty well qualified. Everybody seems pretty in consensus about that. But is he prepared to do some cleanup over there?
Yeah, you know, we won't know till we know, to be quite blunt. And guys like General Mattis that have been out in the battlefield for a long time. I mean, they call him Mad Dog Mattis because he's a leader of men from the front, not from a desk, not from operations command on a ship out to sea. He's a guy that's out front and taking no prisoners. I would imagine that Trump is having the same discussion with Mattis as he is across the board with everybody coming in, like Dr. Ben Carson today announced as HUD secretary, where the talk has always been, we waste more money than we spend on delivering services with bureaucracy that does not want to be cut because that's their livelihood.
Over at the State Department, the short list turning into a long list. Is there an urgency for Trump to pick his Secretary of State? Is this something you think he should be taking his time with? And if so, what's your thought on that?
You know, there's a couple different schools of thought on this. First of all, I thought it was all over with 3 weeks ago, and it was going to be Rudy Giuliani. And maybe it still will be, who knows? But every couple of days, out comes another name. A couple of comments on this. First of all, Dr. G, Trump is way ahead of a number of presidents, the last few especially, in selection of his cabinet and key advisors. So he's not behind the curve.
Exactly.
He's actually far ahead of it, number one. Number two, if you look at his inclusiveness, he's reaching people that were not necessarily Trump people, i.e. Mitt Romney or Nikki Haley, and they are now within the fold. Very smart politics by Donald Trump, because even if he doesn't pick Mitt Romney as Secretary of State, Mitt Romney will not be able to be a Monday morning quarterback for the next 4 years and talk badly about President Trump, because quite frankly, all he's done recently is talk about how terrific it is to even be considered as part of the team. So I like the deliberateness. I also like the inclusiveness. I mean, there's 13 names or something like that being considered, where 2-3 weeks ago there were just a couple.
Yeah. Well, Ben Carson is going to be the new HUD secretary, and some say he's not qualified because he's only a brain surgeon after all, not a urban housing expert, I guess. What do you think about that?
You know, I've got a personal story on that. I happened to have lunch with Dr. Carson some months ago, as I think you know, and all he talked about in that lunch, and it was not a big deal, it was fairly casual, was education and how he became what he is because of the education that he was able to get, largely because of his own mother. He's got a lot of very cool ideas about education, as does the education secretary that's been appointed. For example, there's going to be an explosion of charter schools in America, Dr. Gina, which will be great for competition. The teachers' unions are obviously very upset, but you know what? A little competition in that field is going to be great,
right?
Because kids are going to do better.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. All right, Barry. Well, you keep us posted, and we'll keep bringing you back to keep us updated. Thank you so much for being with us.
Of course.
All right, my friend, take care.